The cold air in your room is not as innocent as it feels. It began as a machine for wet paper and smudged ink. But once humans learned how to control the air inside a room, the outside world started changing too. Movie theaters filled again. Families moved south. Political power shifted. Desert cities rose from the sand, and the planet began paying the energy cost. This is not just a story about comfort. It is a story about control. Welcome to English Mindwave, where ordinary inventions reveal the hidden forces that shape civilization. If stories like this help you see history differently while improving your English naturally, please subscribe to support the channel. In the summer of 1902, inside a printing plant in Brooklyn, New York, the air was heavy with humidity. Paper was swelling. Ink was drying too slowly, and colors that should have landed perfectly on the page began to shift, blur, and bleed into one another. A clean image became a damaged image. A profitable job became waste. To most people, this was only a factory problem. Fix the paper, fix the ink, save the company money. But to the curious learner who follows history through economics, politics, and human behavior, this tiny problem opens a much larger door. Because the machine built to stop smudged ink would one day move millions of people, change movie theaters, reshape American politics, make desert cities possible, and create one of the biggest energy questions of modern life. The young engineer assigned to the problem was Willis Haviland Carrier. He was only 25 years old. He was not trying to cool human beings. He was not imagining homes in Florida, glass towers in Dubai, or lawmakers working through summer. His mission was much simpler. Make the air dry enough so the paper would behave. But hidden inside that simple mission was a new kind of power, the ability to control indoor weather. Carrier was born in 1876 in Angola, New York, near Lake Erie. He was not introduced to the world as a miracle child. As a boy, he struggled with fractions until his mother helped him understand by cutting apples into pieces. A whole apple became halves. Halves became quarters. An invisible idea became something the hands could see. That small childhood scene matters. Carrier's future work followed the same pattern. He took something invisible, moisture in the air, and made it measurable, controllable, almost obedient. After graduating from Cornell University in 1901, Carrier joined the Buffalo Forge Company. His early work was practical and quiet: heating systems, drying machines, factory equipment. Then the Brooklyn printing problem arrived, and Carrier began studying air not as empty space, but as a mixture of temperature, moisture, and movement. His solution was simple, but powerful. Warm, humid air would pass across coils filled with cold water. As the air cooled, water vapor condensed out of it. The air became drier. The paper stopped changing shape. The colors could finally land where they belonged. Carrier had discovered more than a factory repair. He had found a way to control humidity with precision. Later, on a foggy train platform in Pittsburgh, he watched mist move across the tracks and saw a secret written in the air. Fog formed when air reached its dew point, the moment when vapor turned back into water. If nature could create that moment outside, a machine could create it inside. That realization became the foundation of modern air conditioning. Once manufactured, weather became possible The question was no longer whether air could be controlled. The question was who would use that control first. The first people to understand that controlled air could become desire were not lawmakers, architects, or city planners. They were theater owners, watching summer audiences disappear. In the early 1920s, American movie theaters had a problem no poster could solve. When summer arrived, audiences stayed away. A cinema was built for darkness, not fresh air. The windows had to stay closed. The room had to stay quiet. Hundreds of people sat shoulder to shoulder in heavy heat, breathing the same stale air, waiting for a story on the screen while their bodies wanted to leave. People do not only buy entertainment. They buy conditions. They buy comfort, escape, and the feeling that the outside world has been held back for a little while. That was what Carrier's machine offered. In 1925, his cooling system was installed at the Rivoli Theater in Times Square. The audience arrived with folding fans, already prepared for discomfort. They knew what summer theaters felt like. They expected heat. They expected sweat. They expected to survive the movie, not relax inside it. At first, the room was still warm. For a moment, the experiment seemed uncertain. Then, slowly, the air changed. The heat loosened its grip. The humidity faded. The room became easier to breathe in. One fan stopped moving. Then another. Then another. Across the theater, hands lowered into laps. People were not only watching a film anymore. They were experiencing a new kind of indoor world. After that, theaters began selling more than movies. They advertised refrigerated air. They invited people to come inside because it was cool. And on the hottest days, the machine itself became part of the attraction. A ticket bought 2 hours of story, but also 2 hours of relief. This changed the rhythm of entertainment. Summer, once a weak season for theaters, began to feel profitable. The habit of going to the movies during the hottest months helped prepare the ground for what later became the summer blockbuster. But the deeper change was still ahead. Once people learned that the outside climate could be defeated inside a public building, they began wanting that same miracle at home. After World War II, window air conditioners slowly moved into American living rooms. At first, they were expensive and rare. Then production grew, prices fell, and cool air became part of middle-class life. And once Americans believed that heat could be defeated at home, the old map of the country started to look less permanent. And before air conditioning entered ordinary homes, the American South and Southwest had lived under summer's authority. Cities like Houston, New Orleans, Phoenix, Savannah, and Charleston were places where climate shaped work, sleep, health, architecture, and ambition. Heat was not a background detail. It decided what kind of life could be built. Older homes understood this. They were designed almost like quiet agreements with the weather. Ceilings rose high because hot air needed somewhere to go. Windows were large and placed across from each other, hoping to catch any breeze moving through the street. Small transom windows above doors allowed air to pass from room to room. Deep porches wrapped around houses, shading the walls and creating a second living room outside. The porch was more than architecture. It was evidence of another kind of society. Families sat outside after supper. Neighbors talked across yards. Children moved between houses. People did not live sealed away from the street. The climate was difficult, but it also pushed people toward one another. Then the machine changed the bargain. As cooling became more affordable, the Sun Belt began to rise. The old barrier of unbearable summer weakened. Companies looked south and saw cheaper land, lower operating costs, lighter union pressure, and mild winters. Workers followed the jobs. Retirees followed the warmth. Developers followed the demand. Texas expanded. Florida grew into a national giant. Phoenix became a desert boomtown. Atlanta moved from regional city to major metropolitan center. The movement was so large that it did not only change where Americans lived. It changed where power lived. But something quieter disappeared along the way, and the new suburban house no longer needed high ceilings, sleeping porches, or careful cross breezes. It needed sealed windows, lower ceilings, insulation, and a compressor outside. The home turned inward. The porch lost its purpose. Around the same time, television entered the living room, and together, cool air and glowing screens created a more private American life. The political map moved too. As millions of people moved into warmer states, congressional seats and electoral college votes moved with them. The Sun Belt became more powerful, and national campaigns had to follow the people. Analysts like Kevin Phillips saw that population growth in the South and West could reshape elections. Nixon and Reagan later benefited from this changing geography. Air conditioning did not create these political shifts alone. History is never that simple. Civil rights, economics, labor, religion, media, and party strategy all mattered. But cooling made the migration easier, larger, and more permanent. A machine does not need to speak to influence a nation. Sometimes it only needs to make a hot place feel like home. And the same machine that made hot places feel like home in America was also preparing to build entire cities in climates where comfort had once seemed almost impossible. In the Gulf, heat was not just a season. It was a condition of life. Before modern cooling, places like Dubai relied on older wisdom, wind towers that caught the breeze, thick walls that resisted the sun, small windows, shaded courtyards, and buildings shaped by respect for the desert. These were not primitive ideas. They were intelligent answers to a harsh environment. Then oil wealth arrived, and air conditioning gave that wealth a new body. Glass towers rose. Shopping malls expanded into indoor worlds. Airports, hotels, offices, and apartments appeared in places where summer heat could become dangerous within minutes. Modern Dubai and Abu Dhabi were not built on oil alone. They were built on cold air. Here, the story becomes both impressive and uncomfortable. Air conditioning protects people. It allows work, sleep, travel, medicine, business, and modern life in extreme heat. As in many places, it is no longer just luxury. It is safety. But it also demands enormous electricity. The more people cool the inside, the more energy the outside world must produce. And as the planet grows warmer, the need for cooling grows stronger. So the invention becomes a loop. The more humans cool the inside, the more they may warm the outside. The warmer the outside becomes, the more humans need to cool the inside. This is the paradox of air conditioning. It began as a technical repair, but it ended as a lesson about unintended consequences. Willis Carrier wanted to stop paper from swelling and ink from smearing. He was not trying to redesign civilization, but the machine that fixed the ink helped reshape cities, politics, migration, entertainment, and the future of energy itself. In the end, this is not only the story of a machine, as it is the story of how one small solution can grow far beyond its original purpose. Every invention gives humanity something and quietly asks for something in return. Comfort can create opportunity, but it can also create dependence. So in modern life, the lesson is to look more carefully at the ordinary things around us. The tools people use every day may be shaping their habits, choices, communities, and future more than they realize. A small problem, a small idea, or a small decision can create a chain of consequences bigger than anyone expects. That does not mean people should reject progress. It means people should understand it more deeply before accepting every convenience. Without questions, a wiser mind can ask, what does this give? What does it change? What does it cost? And now the quiet question remains. Which everyday invention do you think has changed human life the most? Air conditioning, the smartphone, the car, or something else? Please share your thoughts in the comments so everyone can learn from different perspectives. And if this story helped you see history in a new way while improving your English naturally, please subscribe to English Mindwave to support the channel and give us more motivation to create better stories in the future.